he completely detached himself from everything in Olam Hazeh. The second he was nifter, he went straight up to Shemayim and he never came back down again. That's the reason why he doesn't know why he's buried himself.
Top of DAF Dalet.
DAF Dalet, right. V'omer Reb Chama ber Reb Chanina. Reb Chama ber Chanina says, Moshe Eitzel Beis Pa'ar. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu buried next to Beis Pa'ar? K'dei l'chaper al Ma'isa Pa'ar, to atone for the Avera of Baal Pa'ar. And Tosfos explains that the year, on the day of the anniversary that the Klal Yisrael did a chet with the daughters of Midian, Baal Pa'ar would rise up from the desert to be mekatrig, to say against Klal Yisrael in Shemayim, and Moshe Rabbeinu would force him back down again. So after he was nifter, he was buried near Baal Pa'ar, so that every year again, when the Baal Pa'ar would go up to try to mekatrig against Klal Yisrael, he would see the kever of Moshe Rabbeinu and he would go back down. V'omer Rabbi Chama ber Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chama ber Chanina says, "Ma'id diksiv achrei Hashem Elokeichem telechu." You should go after Hashem, your God. Is it possible for a person to go after the Shechina? As the pasuk says, Ki Hashem Elokecha eish eichla. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is compared to a fire that consumes everything. So obviously we do not mean that a person is walking behind Hashem, because that seemingly would be okay. What it means is just like we say by Achar Elihim Achirim, when we refer to idols, we say do not go after foreign gods. It means do not become close to them. So too we are saying, how do you get close to God? The way you get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to go in to emulate his character traits. Mahu malbish arum, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu dresses the people who need clothing. By the pasuk by Adam and Chava, after the Eifim Beis Hadas, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them ksainis or, and he dressed them. Af ata, so too you, halbish arum, should dress people who need clothing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu bika charlim, just like as the HaKadosh Baruch Hu visits the sick people, the Ksiv by Avram Avinu after he had the Bris Milah, Vayera Elov Hashem Ba'elonei Mamrei, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to him in the plains of Mamrei. Af ata, so to you, Bakar Chaylim, should visit sick people. HaKadosh Baruch Hu nichem avelim, just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu comforts the mourners. The Ksiv Vayhi Achar Yimois Avram Vayavarech Elohim Es Yitzchak Benoi. Just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after Avram Avinu was nifter, HaKadosh Baruch Hu went to Yitzchak and comforted him, and he blessed him. And Rashi says the blessing was the blessing of nichem avelim, which of Hashem Yimakim Aschem, that we say to every mourner. So too you should comfort the mourners. HaKadosh Baruch Hu koiver mesim, just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu buries dead people. The Ksiv vayikver oisoi bagei af ata koiver mesim, so too you should bury the dead people. The Gemara darshans what we said by the Adam and Chava, that he gave them a ksainis ar. Ksainis ar, Rav and Shmuel. Chad Amar, one of them says davar habam and ar, something which comes from the skin, which is referring to wool, as wool grows off the skin of a sheep. The Chad Amar and the other man Amar says davar sha'ar nena mimenu, something which the skin benefits from it, because wool is a little bit itchy and scratchy to the skin, whereas linen is softer and is more comfortable to the skin. Darash ab simloi. The Torah, the beginning of it, talks about the acts of kindness, and the end of it discusses the acts of kindness. The beginning of it is talking about acts of kindness. The Ksiv, as the pasuk says, that he's talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu he dressed Adam and Chava in garments. The end of it is talking about kind deeds. The Ksiv, HaKadosh Baruch Hu buried Moshe Rabbeinu bagay. Darash Rabbi Simloi. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu desire to go into Eretz Yisrael? Did he desire to eat from the fruits, or to benefit from the fat of the land? Moshe Rabbeinu said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Harbe mitzvahs nitztavi Yisrael. There are many commandments that Klal Yisrael were commanded. Vein miskayim elo b'Eretz Yisrael, and some of them are only miskayim in Eretz Yisrael, like shvias and all mitzvahs hatuluyas ba'aretz, trumas, maestris, shvias, peah, and all those leket shicha. Those are all only in Eretz Yisrael. I want to go into Eretz Yisrael in order that I can be able to mekayim all those mitzvahs. Amar la HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered him, Klum ata mevakesh el lekabel schar. What's the reason you want to go in? Only to get the reward for it. Ma'ilani alecha, I will consider it ki'ilu asisim. I will consider it as if you did them. Shneamar, as the pasuk says, L'chein achalik loy berabim. I will divide up his portion from the multitudes. That's atzumim yichalik shol, and I will give him the portion of strong people for his spoils. Tachas asher herod lamas nafshay, since he poured out his nefesh to die. Ves poishim nimne, and he was counted amongst the sinners. V'hu chet rabim nasa, and he carried the sin of many. V'leposhim yafgia, and he davened for the sinners. Now the Gemara darshans the pasuk we just said. L'chein achalak le'berabim, I will give him the portion of many. Yachol ka'achronim, I would think that the portion he's giving him is only like the achronim who did not mimekayim the mitzvahs with such a high madrega. V'loy kirishanim, not like the earlier people who mekayim the mitzvahs with more pure intent and got a bigger schar. I will give him the portion, the great people as his spoils. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Shehin atzumim b'Torah, they were great in Torah of the mitzvahs, and that was the portion that he got because of that. The pasuk continues. We're going to darshan tachas asher hera lamos nafshay, that since he poured out his soul to die, shemasar atzmei lamisa, he gave over himself for death. Sheneamar, as the pasuk says, after the cheta ego, Moshe Rabbeinu davened to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'ayin machini na, erase me from your Sefer Torah. If you're not going to mechaper on Klal Yisrael, you're not going to forgive them, erase me from your Sefer Torah. Vespoishim nimna, and he was counted amongst the sinners. Shenimna im maisi midbar, he was counted amongst the people who were nifter in the midbar, and were the only two people we know that went into Eretz Yisrael were Yeshua and Kalev. V'hu chet rabim nasa, he carried the sin of many. Shekiper al maisa ha'egel, he was mechaper on Klal Yisrael for the chet of the egel of the golden calf. U'lapoishim yifka, and he davened for the sinners. Shabikesh rachamim, he asked for mercy al Poshei Yisrael, on the sinners of Klal Yisrael. Shiachzur b'tshuva, that they should do a tshuva. Ve'ein pegia el tefillah, the Gemara darshans that pegia is a lashon, means tefillah. Shene'emar ve'ata al yistispal ba'ata omazeh, do not daven for this nation. Ve'al tisa ba'adam rina ve'tefillah ve'al tifku bi. So we see the lashon of Pegia is referred to as tefillah. Now the Mishnah here is going to discuss the mincha SOTAH that the SOTAH was bringing, and it's going to contrast it to other menachas that we also bring in the Beis Hamikdash. The man brought the mincha for his wife in a kefifa mitzvah, which was some sort of basket which was woven of bark of the palm tree. And he placed it on her hands in order to tie her out. We will discuss why he was tying her out in the Gemara. Now the Mishnah is contrasting this mincha as opposed to other menachos. All other menachos, they started off and they ended off in a klisharis. V'zu, and this mincha of mincha SOTAH, tchilasa b'kfifa mitzvahs v'seifa b'klisharis. It started off in this kfifa mitzvahs, this woven basket, and it ended off in a klisharis. Kol ha-menachos tunas shemen v'levayna. Every menacha needs oil and frankincense. V'zu, eina tuna loy shemen v'levayna. It did not require nor shemen nor levayna. Kol ha-menachos ba'is menachitin. All menachos came from flour made of wheat. V'zu ba'a min hasarim. This came from a flour made of barley. Minchas ha'omer, afal pi shabas min hasarim. There was one other mincha that came from barley, which was the minchas ha'omer, which we brought on Pesach, which was mattered us to eat the new grain of that year, which is what we call Chodesh and Yashan. So even though that came from sarin, from barley also, he haisaba garash, it was a garash, it was finely ground and finely sifted. V'zuba kamach, this was a whole grain flour, the barley was ground and it was not sifted whatsoever. Rabbi Gamliel Omer Kashem Shamasa Ma'isa Behema. Rabbi Gamliel says, just as her actions were the actions of an animal, Kach Karbana Michael Behema, so too her mincha was made of animal food. And the Gemara later on is going to explain The reason for it is that she was compared herself to an animal because she did not designate herself one mate, as animals are prone to do. They do not have one mate, and she went and found and did not stay with her single mate. Says the Gemara, Tanya, Abba Chanan Omer Mishum Rabbi Lazar. Abba Chanan says the name of Rabbi Lazar. The reason why we tired her out is in order that she should admit that she is tamei, and we should not have to let her drink and get killed. So, says the Gemara, if we are careful, we are trying to ensure that she shouldn't die and drink the water and end up dying. She's tummy, we want her to admit. And you see how we're careful. We were trying to ensure that she should stay alive. How much more so someone who keeps the mitzvahs, how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants them to stay alive. Asks the Gemara, how do we know the reason why we don't want her? We want her to admit, and we don't want her to we don't want her to die. Maybe the reason is maybe the reason is we don't want to erase the Hashem's name on the Megillah into the water. So we want her to admit before we have a chance. Before we unfortunately have to erase Hashem's name. So how do we know the reason is for her benefit? Maybe it's for Hashem's name, for the benefit of Hashem's name. Kasavar answers the Gemara. There's a machlokas later on in the Gemara what the order of bringing the SOTAH was. Did she drink the water and only afterwards bring her mincha as a karban? And according to the Amman the Omar, the water would not take effect until after her mincha was karav on the mizbeach. And the other man is of the opinion that first they brought the mincha, and then only afterwards the last step was to drink her. So this man, the Omar, is of the opinion that they would first let her drink the water, and then only afterwards would they bring her karban, and the water would only take effect at that later point. So since we're standing at this point when she had already drank the water, so therefore the mishum megillah ha'imchaka la. It was erased Hashem's name. So the only reason why we wanted her to admit was in order that the water shouldn't take effect and she shouldn't end up dying. So that is the raya from this man Omar that we cared about her not dying.
So after we erase the water, erase the name, before she drinks, if she admits she doesn't get killed, right?
Well, according to this man Omar,
well.
If she admits at a certain point, meaning
after they erase the name,
before she drinks the water.
Before she drinks the water.
Yeah, she also. I think the Gemara is going to speak about that when we actually want her to drink the water at that point. That's the Gemara later on. If we ma'ayim love that we want her to drink the water anyways, because once it was erased, we don't want it to go to the waste.
What does it mean that we don't want her to die? I mean, isn't an isha chayv misa?
There was no hasra. There was no. There's no
hasra for being soser is not enough for hasra for the being itself.
No, you need. I'm saying if she was an Ashes, she wouldn't go to the base of the Mikdash. She would get killed right away.
Also, you didn't see the act. You didn't see the act. David didn't see the act. They started going into the room.
There was right. There's only a stira. There's no.
Once you see the act, it's too late.
Not to see it, they have to warn her too.
Right. That's right.
Hasra for the.
Now the Gemara asks a question. In our Mishnah, it's mashma that this kind of mincha came in a kafif of mitzvahs, in this sort of inferior wooden kli, and every other mincha came in a kli sharis that started off in a kli sharis. So the Gemara now brings a brisa that seems to say the opposite. Call v'raminu. We ask the question: Seder menachos ketzad. What was the order that we brought a menachos? It's talking about a regular mincha in the base of Mikdash, which is called the mincha soiles that we're talking about, which was brought of flour. Ketzad adam mevi mincha mitoich beisay. A person brings the mincha from his house, bekalsos shel kesef, in a vessel of silver, v'shalzav, or of gold. And then he puts it into a klisharis. And then he is mekadesh this mincha of the flour in the kli sharis, because the halacha is that before you bring it to the base of Mikdash, it has kedushas mammon only, it's not kedushas damim. It's a monetary value, and you have an ability to redeem it. And if it becomes tameh, you just redeem it. Whereas once it becomes kedusha b'kli, it has an inherent kedusha, and if it becomes tameh, you will not be able to redeem it anymore. There are other halachas also that are negeah once it has kedushas haguf. So when you put it into the kli sharis, it got kedushas haguf. Excuse me, and then he placed on it the oil and the frankincense. And at that point only he brought to the Kayin. The Gemara is going to explain, because till then all the avodas were ksher bazar. It was kosher for a Yisrael to do it. Only at this point, after the oil and frankincense were on it, that point it was required of a Kohen to start doing the avodah. The Kohen Malicha Eitzel Mizbeach, and a Kohen would bring it towards the Mizbeach, Umagisha, and he would bring it close to the Karen Dreimis Ma'aravis, to the southwestern corner, Keneged Chudash Al Karen V'Dayai, next to that corner, and it was enough. Just to get an idea of where we're talking about over here, that when you walked into the Beis HaMikdash from the eastern doors, the main entrance of the eastern side, the Mizbeach was mostly directly in front of you. The ramp to the Mizbeach was on the southern side, which was to the left of the Mizbeach. So the Kohen would walk around the Mizbeach, and he would go between the Heichal and the Mizbeach, and that was the southwestern side, which was the left, the further left corner of the Mizbeach. The ramp again was on the south, which was coming in from the main entrance, was to your left. So he'd walk around to the southwestern corner, and that's where he would do the Hagasha, bring the Mincha to touch this side of the Mizbeach. After he did this Hagasha, he moved the Levina, the frankincense, to the side of the Kli, Litzad Echad. The Kaimitz Mimakim Shenisra B'Shmana, and he took a Kaimitz. The Kaimitz was the action of taking a handful, 3 fingers wide handful of the flour and oil mixture, and that was the part that was makriv on the Mizbeach. He would take it from the area where the oil had gotten absorbed well into the flour. He then took that kamitza, that handful of the flour oil mixture, and he put it into a second klisharis, then they mekadesh it again, the klisharis, and then afterwards he would gather the levina, the frankincense, from the first klisharis, and he would place it upon the nice nagavi, place it upon this kaimitz in the second klisharis. They would bring it up to the Mizbeach in order to be maktir in this second klisharis, and then he would place salt on it. And then he would put it onto the fire, he would burn it in the Mizbeach. Once the kaimetz was put into the fire, the remainder of the mincha of the flour and oil was allowed to be eaten by the kohanim. And the kohanim were allowed litin l'seicha, to place inside the remainders yayin v'shem v'dash, wine, oil, or honey. The only thing that they were not allowed to do is they were not allowed to let it become chametz. It had to be eaten as matzah. So now we're asking the question of the Gemara on our Mishnah. This brayso over here says the kalsis shall ketzav, the kalsis shall zav, in a vessel of silver or of gold. And the Gemara is assuming at this point that those kalim that he brought originally from his house in these vessels were of a private vessel. It was not a klisharis. It wasn't owned by the Beis HaMikdash. So, and our Mishnah it says that only a mincha saita came in a kefifas mitzvahs in this private vessel, and it says every other mincha came in a klisharis. Rapapa answers, Ema bekalim haruyim leklisharis. Our Mishnah that says that every other mincha came in a klisharis does not mean that it actually came in a klisharis. It means that it came in a kli which had the ability, if you were to be makdish it, to become a klisharis. Whereas a kfifa mitzvahs, this bark keli, did not have the ability to become a klisharis. Says the Gemara, Mechlal, from here we could infer the kfifa mitzvahs loy chazia, a kfifa mitzvahs, this keli made of palm bark, would not be able to become a klisharis. Kaman, who is that going like? Deloy Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, is not like Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. The Tanya, as the Brisa says, klisharis sha'asan shall eitz, a klisharis that you made of wood. Rabbi holds that it will not be kosher. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda machshir, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda holds that it's kosher. So Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda is of the opinion that a wooden vessel is kosher for a klisharis. So that would seem to not be like our Mishnah, which our Mishnah is referring to this wooden keli, and there we're saying that it's not able to be a Kli Sharis. Answers the Gemara, Filotemer Rebbeisi Bar Yehuda. We could even say that our Mishnah is going like Rebbeisi Bar Yehuda. Eimar D'Amar Rebbeisi Bar Yehuda. When does Rebbeisi Bar Yehuda say that a wood keli would be kosher? That is only b'chashuvim, when it is a fancy or superior wooden keli and it's a nice wood keli. But b'chusa mi amar, he does not say this by these inferior junky kelim which are made up of the bark of a Kli Sharis. Lastly, does Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda hakrivano l'fechasecha? Does Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda not hold of the pasuk of hakrivano l'fechasecha, which is referring to that whenever you bring a carbon to the Beis Hamikdash, you have to bring the most beautiful things, and you cannot bring inferior quality goods to the Beis Hamikdash. So this kli is of very inferior quality, and even Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda would not agree that it would be kosher because it's such of its quality. Now the Gemara is going to continue and darshan this brisa of we just learned about all the seder of a regular mincha. He placed it in Kli Sharis and he was mekadosh it. Shamas mina, we see from here, Kli Sharis ain't mekadosh el midas. A Kli Sharis could only be mekadosh intentionally. There's a machlokes in Menachem, in the Gemara Menachem, whether or not when you place something in a Kli Sharis, if you have to have intent, or even if you don't intend for it to become kadosh, it automatically gets its kedusha. So this, we're bringing a raya from our brisa, that our brisa says you put it in v'kitcha b'Kli Sharis, that you have to specifically have intent for it to become kaddish. Answers the Gemara, Ema noisim b'Kli Sharis. Maybe we should say that it's you place it in Kli Sharis likadsha in order for it to become kaddish b'Kli Sharis, and of course you have to have that you do not have to have das to have it come kaddish. You place in it the oil and its frankincense. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, and you pour the shemen onto it. And you place the levina on it. And you bring it to the kayin. The ksiv v'hevi el b'nei Aryai. We're bringing the pasuk at this point. The pasuk says v'hevi el b'nei Aryai. Obviously, till then it was kosher for a Yisrael to do any of the actions or the seder of the avodah of this mincha. The kain ma'licha eitzam mizbech. The kain brings it to the mizbech. The ksiv, as the pasuk says, magisha eitzam mizbech, and you should bring it next to the mizbech. Magisha bekeren dermis ma'aravis. You bring it to the southwestern corner, keneged chudash al keren v'dayai, next to the corner of the keren, and it is enough. Minala. How do we know that that is the correct corner to bring it to? How do we know we need the southwestern corner? In the ksiv, as the pasuk says, "V'zois teiras hamincha." This is the Torah of the mincha. Hakrev oisa b'nei Aharon. You should, the children of Aaron should bring it close. L'fnei Hashem, in front of Hashem. El pnei hamizbech, to the front of the face of the mizbech. So here we have in the pasuk two phrases, L'fnei Hashem, which is in front of Hashem, which the Gemara is going to explain refers to Keneged, the opening of the Heichel, of the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodashim, and Al Pnei Mizbech is the face of Mizbech. That's referring to the southern entrance of the Mizbech, because the ramp, as we said, is in the southern side, so the way to get onto the Mizbech would be from the southern side. So that is as a contradicting line in the Pasuk. Metanya, the Willinton Brisa. L'fnei Hashem, if it says in front of Hashem, Yachol b'ma'ariv, you would think it means in the west, which would be opposite the entrance to the Heichal. Tamaloymer al pnei mizbech. We have another pasuk. The second part of the pasuk says it has to be at the entrance to the mizbech. El pnei mizbech. If it only said el pnei mizbech of the entrance to the mizbech, Yachol b'darim, you would think it has to be only in the south. It has to be in front of Hashem, which is the western side. Okay, so how do we deal with this contradiction? You bring it to the southwestern corner where you accomplish both psukim and you have both of them. Rabbi Lazar argues, and he says, do you think you have to bring it to the western side of the keren, or to the southern side of the keren? Amrit. Whenever you find two psukim, one accomplishes itself and also accomplishes its friends, what it says in its friends pasuk, and the other one will accomplish itself but will be mevatel, it will not accomplish its friends pasuk. Manichin es shemekayim atzmai. We leave the pasuk that accomplishes itself umevatel chaveri and is mevatel its friend. V'toifsin es shemekayim atzmai, and we go with the pasuk that is mekayim itself umekayim divrei chaveri and accomplishes its friend. Now he explains what he's referring to as in reference to our pasuk. Kishata omer lefnei Hashem. When the pasuk says lefnei Hashem b'ma'arav in the west, bitalta es pnei hamizbech b'darim. You are going to be mevatel the pasuk of el pnei hamizbech that it has to be in the south. Ukishata omer el pnei hamizbech, and when we say that it has to be in front of Mizbech B'darim in the south, Kiyamto L'fnei Hashem B'mariv, you will also be Mekayim L'fnei Hashem of the west. HaKetzad, so therefore what do? Magisha L'drei Mashal Karen, you bring it to the southern corner of the Mizbech. Asks the Gemara, V'heichon Kiyamto, how are you accomplishing both these psukim? You will only bring it to the southern side of the Mizbech. Omer of Ashi Kosover Haitana Kula Mizbech B'tzafin Kai. This Tana holds, Rabbi Elazar is of the opinion that the entire Mizbech was in the northern side section of the courtyard. There's a machlokes in the Gemara. There's actually 3 machlokes in where exactly the Mizbech was situated in the courtyard of the Mizbech, of the Beis Hamikdash. Was it smack in the middle? Was it on the southern side, or was it in the northern side? So according to this man, the Amar, it was in the northern side. And if it was in the northern side, then even the southern side of the Mizbeach was, from there you were able to see a direct entry directly into the Heichal, and there you would be Mekayim both of them. You have El Pnei Mizbech on the southern side, and you are also standing directly in front of the entrance to the Heichal, into the Kodesh, so you have the your accomplishing of Lefnei Hashem. So this man number holds, you brought it to the southern corner. Asks the Gemara, my Vidaya. We said that you bring it to the southwest corner, Vidaya, and it's enough. What does it mean, it's enough? Omer of Ashi explains, we would have thought, Tibai Hagasha Mincha Gufa. You have to take the mincha, the flour and oil, out of the kli and touch it directly to the corner of the Mizbech. Kamash Malon, that you do not have to do that, it is enough to put it inside the kli and touch the kli to the corner of the Mizbech. Asks the Gemara, maybe you actually have to do that. Where do we know that you're not required to do that from? Omar Kra, as the pasuk says, you should bring it to the Kayin, and he should bring it to the Mizbech. Darshans the Gemara, Maha Krov Eitzal Kayin Bekli, just as when you bring it to the Kayin, it is inside of a vessel. Af Hagasha Eitz Mizbech Bekli, so too when the Kayin brings it to the Mizbech, it is also inside a Kli. You move the Levaina to the side. In order that you do not have any crumbs get inside your kaimitz. As the pasuk says, as the Mishnah says, Komatz va'ola biyadei tzrar or gargar melach or karet levaina pasol. We learned in a Mishnah that the halacha is that when you take the kaimitz, this handful of 3 fingers wide in your hand, it has to be just of flour and oil. If you have anything inside of it, be it a grain of salt or a crumb of this frankincense, it will be puzzled because you are missing the required amount that you need in this kaimitz to be. So therefore, we moved all the levain to the side, so that in order that nothing should get inside the kaimitz, and you have the complete shear of it. Because the Mishnah says that would be a puzzle kaimitz. The kaimitz b'makom shenisra b'shmana, you did it from an area where there was a lot of oil, the oil had gotten absorbed well. Minalon, how do you know this? The ksiv, as the pasuk says, misalto mishamna, migirsha mishamna. That's referring to 2 psukim. One is referring to the wheat, the flour made of wheat. One is referring to the flour made of barley. And it says misalto mishamna has to be from the flour and from the oil. So therefore, we know that you need to get a good, you have to get an area which is full of oil and flour. You then took this kaimitz, this handful, and you placed it into a second klisharis. Why do you need it? It was already mekadesh one time, because we're talking over here about kedushas haguf, which we spoke about, the inherent kedusha in the object. So you already placed it from your private vessel into the first klisharis and already got kedushas haguf. So why do you need to now go place this kaimitz into a second klisharis and mekadesh it a second time? Answers the Gemara, midi dehavi adam, just like the blood. Dam, the blood, just as when you shechted the behema, you used a knife, and that knife was mekadosh the dam inside the behema. So too, after the kohen was mekabel, he caught all that blood into a klisharis. So it got a second kedusha. So too, by a mincha, the seder of the mincha very much mimics the seder that you find of the karbanos of an animal. And you take the levain, the frankincense, and you put it onto this kaimitz, the ksiv, as the pasuk says, all of the levaina that is on the mincha, it has to be karaf. We'll stop.